Imagine waking up to find that the sun hasn't risen. Not a fleeting eclipse, but a darkness that lingers for days, weeks, months. And then 18 months pass and you still haven't seen a single dawn. In 536 after Christ, this wasn't fiction, it was reality. Welcome to the darkest year in human history. In the midst of the Middle Ages, Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia were enveloped by a mysterious fog that blocked the light of both sun and moon. The sky remained dark, temperatures plummeted, and the world plunged into climatic chaos. This phenomenon, known as the perpetual night of the Middle Ages, marked the beginning of a decade of famine, disease, and despair. But what caused this catastrophic event? And how did humanity survive? Think about it. For 1.5 years, people lived in a twilight world where the sun appeared as dim as the moon, where crops withered in the fields, and where many believed the end times had finally arrived. Historical accounts from that period tell us of a year without summer, where frost killed harvests even in July and August. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness like the moon, casting the known world into a continuous eerie dusk. Recent studies of ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica have finally revealed the truth behind this mysterious darkness. A massive volcanic eruption, likely in Iceland or North America, that spewed ash and sulfur particles high into the atmosphere, creating a veil that blocked the sun's warmth and light. This single event triggered what scientists now call the Late Antique Little Ice Age, the coldest decade in over 2,300 years. The effects were devastating and far-reaching. The Eastern Roman Empire under Justinian was battling a plague that would kill millions. In China, snowfall in August destroyed crops. From Ireland to China, civilizations struggled to survive as famines spread across continents. Some historians believe this period marks the true beginning of the Dark Ages, as the ecological catastrophe accelerated the fall of ancient empires and reshaped human history. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great empires, like this video, subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel and don't miss a single episode. In the next segments, we'll dive deeper into how this darkness changed the world forever, the desperate measures people took to survive, and the surprising ways this disaster may have reshaped the course of human civilization. The year 536 after Christ began like any other. People went about their daily lives, farmers tended their crops, and merchants traversed the ancient trade routes. But something sinister was brewing in the skies above. Imagine waking up one morning to find the sun barely visible, casting a weak, ghostly light across the land. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, yet the sun remained dim, like a pale moon hanging in the eternal twilight. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote in his chronicles that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, throughout the whole year. People began to whisper that the end times had come. As this supernatural darkness persisted, its effects were devastating. Crops withered in the fields, unable to grow in the weak sunlight. Rivers and lakes froze over, even during what should have been the warmth of summer. The cold was relentless, affecting regions that had never known frost. This marked the beginning of the coldest decade humanity had experienced in over 2,300 years, a period that would reshape the course of history itself. But here's something truly fascinating. During this time, chroniclers across Europe and the Middle East reported what they called blood rain. The sky would take on an eerie reddish hue, and crimson droplets would fall from above. Modern scientists believe this phenomenon was caused by volcanic particles in the atmosphere, turning the sky blood red and creating the terrifying illusion of blood falling from the heavens. Can you imagine the terror this must have inspired in people who had no scientific explanation for such events? Many believed it was divine punishment, while others thought it heralded the apocalypse. In Constantinople, the mighty capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, people gathered in churches and temples, praying for the sun's return. Farmers watched helplessly as their fields turned barren, and rulers struggled to maintain order as food became increasingly scarce. This wasn't just a passing natural disaster, it was the beginning of a chain of events that would transform the known world. The darkness of 536 didn't just change the climate, it changed the very fabric of human society. From the peaks of the Alps to the deserts of Arabia, from the shores of Britain to the steppes of Asia, no region was spared from its effects. This was truly the year that changed the world, leaving an indelible mark on human history that would be remembered for centuries to come. For centuries, the true cause of the eternal twilight remained a mystery. Medieval scholars blamed everything from divine wrath to dragons breathing smoke into the sky, but the real answer lay hidden in the most unlikely of places: layers of ancient ice. Modern scientists have finally unraveled this 1,500-year-old mystery, and the truth is just as dramatic as the legends. Picture this. Somewhere in the world, perhaps in Iceland or North America, a massive volcano awakens. But this wasn't just any eruption. This was a catastrophic event that would reshape global history. The volcano, or possibly a series of volcanoes, exploded with such force that it hurled millions of tons of ash and sulfur particles high into the Earth's atmosphere. These particles formed a thick, mysterious veil that wrapped around our planet like a dark blanket. Imagine a fog so dense and widespread that it could dim the sun itself, turning day into twilight across 3 continents. Here's where the detective work gets fascinating. Scientists studying ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica discovered a remarkable story frozen in time. Each layer of ice is like a page in Earth's diary, and the layer from 536 after Christ tells a devastating tale. They found significant amounts of volcanic glass and sulfur trapped in the ice, unmistakable evidence of one of the most extreme volcanic events in human history. The sulfur particles were particularly crucial in this story. When launched into the upper atmosphere, they formed a reflective barrier, bouncing the sun's warmth back into space. It was like someone had placed a giant mirror above the Earth, blocking both heat and light. This created what scientists now call a volcanic winter. Imagine a winter so severe it lasted for years, not months. What makes this event even more extraordinary is its scale. The volcanic debris spread so far and stayed in the atmosphere so long that it affected weather patterns across the entire northern hemisphere. From the shores of Constantinople to the plains of China, everyone looked up at the same dim, hazy sky. Think about it. While people of that time couldn't see or understand what was happening in the atmosphere above them, they were witnessing one of the most significant climate events in human history. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful forces of nature can act invisibly, yet change the world in ways that echo through centuries. This wasn't just a local disaster or a brief inconvenience. The volcanic winter of 536 reshaped societies, toppled empires, and marked the beginning of what we now call the Dark Ages. And it all started with a volcano, somewhere in the world, whose name and exact location remain unknown to this day, perhaps one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. As the mysterious darkness persisted, a wave of desperation swept across the lands. Imagine being a farmer, watching helplessly as your crops withered and died in the fields, knowing that your family's survival depended on that harvest. The cold was merciless. Livestock froze to death in their pens, and wild animals fell dead in the forests. This wasn't just a bad season, this was a catastrophe that would test the very limits of human endurance. In villages and towns across Europe, the Middle East and Asia, granaries slowly emptied. People began to ration their food, but as weeks turned into months, even these careful measures weren't enough. The wealthy, who had always enjoyed abundant food, now found their gold couldn't buy what didn't exist. The poor, already living on the edge of survival, were pushed beyond their breaking point. The streets of Constantinople, once bustling with life and commerce, became eerily quiet. The Byzantine Empire, at the height of its power under Emperor Justinian, struggled to maintain order as food riots broke out in the cities. Even the mighty imperial granaries, usually well stocked to feed the massive population, began running dangerously low. Religious leaders led processions through the streets, burning incense and praying for divine intervention. But the darkness brought more than just hunger. In these weakened populations, disease found fertile ground. The cold and malnutrition left people vulnerable to illness, and the crowded conditions in cities became perfect breeding grounds for epidemics. This period coincided with the first recorded outbreak of the bubonic plague in Europe, later known as the Plague of Justinian, which would claim millions of lives. In Western Europe, where the remains of the Roman Empire had fractured into smaller kingdoms, the situation was even more dire. These fragile new nations, already struggling to establish themselves, now faced total collapse. Some historians believe this environmental catastrophe was the final push that sent Europe spiraling into what we now call the Dark Ages. Communities turned to desperate measures to survive. People ate tree bark and made bread from ground ferns. Families abandoned their homes, becoming refugees in search of food and warmth. The lucky ones found shelter in monasteries, which often had better food stores, while others formed roving bands, doing whatever was necessary to survive. What's particularly haunting about this period is how it affected people's minds. Many truly believed they were witnessing the end of the world. Ancient chronicles tell us of people falling into deep despair, convinced that God had abandoned them. Some turned to ancient pagan rituals, while others became convinced that sacrifices were needed to appease divine wrath. The psychological impact of living in perpetual twilight, never knowing if the sun would return to its full strength, must have been overwhelming. And here's something fascinating. This period gave rise to numerous legends and folklore that would persist for centuries. Stories of dragons breathing smoke into the sky, of gods fighting in the heavens, and of magical curses were all attempts to explain the inexplicable darkness. Some of these tales survived in medieval manuscripts, proving how deeply this event scarred the collective memory of entire civilizations. Did you know that some people of that time carved messages into stone, believing they might be the last words humanity would ever write? If you're enjoying this glimpse into one of history's most mysterious disasters, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the Medieval Archives for more incredible historical tales. And tell us in the comments, how do you think you would have survived during this time of darkness? The Year of Darkness left an indelible mark on human history, reshaping societies and empires in ways that would echo through centuries. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this catastrophe isn't just what it destroyed, it's what it created. Think of it as humanity's greatest test of adaptation. The aftermath of 536 after Christ lingered for decades, fundamentally altering how people lived, farmed, and organized their communities. The Eastern Roman Empire, despite its mighty walls and vast armies, found itself weakened not by invaders, but by nature itself. The empire's population declined by nearly 40% in the years following the darkness, a devastating blow from which it would never fully recover. But humans are remarkably resilient creatures. In the face of failing traditional farming methods, communities began to experiment with new agricultural techniques. They learned to plant hardy crops that could survive in shorter growing seasons and developed new methods of food preservation. Some communities in Northern Europe discovered that certain grains could be planted in autumn and survive under snow, leading to the widespread adoption of winter crops, a practice that continues to this day. Here's something remarkable. The monasteries of this period became centers of agricultural innovation. Monks, with their tradition of recording knowledge, preserved and developed farming techniques that would later help Europe recover. They created detailed agricultural calendars and experimented with crop rotation, laying the groundwork for medieval farming practices that would feed future generations. The crisis also reshaped trade networks. As traditional routes failed due to crop failures and social upheaval, new paths emerged. Communities that had never previously communicated began trading resources and knowledge. The Norse people, for instance, expanded their fishing techniques and began exploring new territories, leading to innovations in shipbuilding and navigation that would later enable the Viking Age. Perhaps most intriguingly, this period of darkness sparked a revolution in how societies stored and shared food. Community granaries became more sophisticated, and new methods of food preservation were developed. Some historians believe our modern concepts of community food banks can trace their origins to the cooperative survival strategies that emerged during this time. The darkness of 536 also left its mark on human culture and spirituality. The event is recorded in the folklore of countless cultures, from Irish myths to Chinese chronicles. These stories often speak not just of the darkness, but of how people came together to survive it. In many ways, it strengthened the human bonds that hold communities together. But here's the most powerful legacy. This catastrophe taught humanity an invaluable lesson about our relationship with nature. It showed that even the mightiest civilizations are vulnerable to environmental changes, while also demonstrating our remarkable ability to adapt and survive. This understanding would prove crucial centuries later, as societies faced other climate-related challenges. The year 536 after Christ wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. It marked the start of new ways of thinking about agriculture, community, and survival. While it's often remembered as the year that plunged the world into darkness, it also sparked innovations that would light the way forward for future generations. In many ways, we're still living with the legacy of that fateful year. The agricultural techniques, community structures, and survival strategies that emerged from this crisis helped shape the medieval world and, by extension, our modern one. It stands as a testament to human resilience and ingenuity, reminding us that even in our darkest hours, we can find ways to adapt, innovate, and survive. As we close this dark chapter of human history, it's worth reflecting on what the year 536 after Christ teaches us about ourselves. This wasn't just a story about darkness and disaster. It's a testament to human resilience in the face of unprecedented challenges. When the sun dimmed and the world grew cold, our ancestors didn't simply surrender to despair. They adapted, innovated, and survived. They faced a crisis that would have seemed apocalyptic: no sunlight, failing crops, plummeting temperatures, and the collapse of everything they knew. Yet they persevered, leaving us not just with a cautionary tale, but with a blueprint for survival. Think about it. How would our modern world cope with such an event? We have technology and scientific understanding that our ancestors couldn't dream of, but are we more or less vulnerable than they were? Our global food systems, international trade, and interconnected economies might make us more resilient in some ways, yet more fragile in others. The story of 536 reminds us that nature remains an unpredictable force. Whether it's a volcanic winter, a pandemic, or climate change, we continue to face environmental challenges that test our adaptability and resilience. The questions our ancestors faced during their year of darkness still echo today. How do we survive? How do we adapt? How do we maintain our humanity in the face of catastrophe? But perhaps the most powerful lesson from this historical event is that darkness, no matter how profound, is not permanent. The sun eventually returned to its full strength, crops grew again, and humanity emerged stronger, wiser, and more resourceful. The innovations and adaptations born from this crisis helped shape the medieval world and continue to influence us today. As we face our own global challenges in the modern era, the Year of Darkness stands as both a warning and a source of hope. It reminds us that while humanity may be vulnerable to the forces of nature, we possess a remarkable capacity to adapt, innovate, and overcome even the most daunting obstacles. What do you think about this fascinating piece of history? How would you handle living through such a catastrophic event? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this incredible story of survival and resilience. If you've enjoyed this journey through one of history's most mysterious and challenging years, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with others who might find it fascinating. Subscribe to the Medieval Archives for more compelling stories from the past that shed light on our present and future. And make sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next historical adventure. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest of times, humanity finds a way to shine.